Welcome to the Explainer. All right, today we're going to talk about something that secretly pulls the strings on a lot of our decisions. It's this powerful, hidden force called scarcity.
So let's start with a feeling I bet you've had. You're browsing online, you see something you kind of like, and then you see those magic words, only one left. Suddenly, your heart starts pounding, right? That sudden, almost desperate urge to buy it, that's exactly what we're going to unpack today.
And believe it or not, this powerful feeling has a name. And scientists figured it out decades ago with cookies. Yep, cookies. It's a simple little story that reveals a huge quirk in how our brains figure out what's valuable.
This is what psychologists call the scarcity principle. The basic idea is simple. When something is rare or hard to get, our brains just automatically assume it's more valuable. It's a mental shortcut, right? If it's scarce, it must be good. This was all laid out in some classic studies back in the 70s. So, let's get back to those cookies I mentioned. This experiment is so simple, but it just perfectly shows how this whole scarcity thing messes with our heads.
So you have two jars. One's packed with 10 cookies, the other has just 2. Now, here's the kicker. The cookies in both jars were exactly the same. But when people were asked to rate them, they consistently said the cookies from the nearly empty jar were tastier, more desirable, just better. Think about that. Scarcity didn't just make them want the cookie more, it literally made it taste better to them. That's wild.
Okay, so if just thinking something is rare can make a boring cookie taste amazing, you can bet that the world of marketing was paying very close attention. This whole idea of creating urgency, yeah, that's no accident. It is a full-blown strategy.
And you see this everywhere. Limited edition sneakers, those Black Friday doorbuster deals, the only 2 left in stock alerts on Amazon, even countdown timers on websites. It's all designed to hit one very specific button in your brain, the fear of missing out. You know, FOMO. They're creating a sense of competition, telling you better act now or you're going to lose it forever.
The reason this works so well is because of something called loss aversion. Our brains are just wired this way. We hate losing things way more than we enjoy gaining them. The pain of losing $20 feels way worse than the joy of finding $20. So that almost gone alert, it's not about gaining a product, it's about the fear of losing the opportunity to have it. And that feeling is powerful.
All right, so we've seen how it's used to sell us stuff. But here's where the story gets a lot deeper, and maybe a little darker. Because scarcity isn't just a marketing trick. It's a force that can actually change the way our brains work.
Yeah, so what if scarcity isn't just about a limited edition pair of shoes? What if it can completely take over your mind? We're moving away from shopping carts now and into the actual mechanics of our brain under pressure. Because it turns out, scarcity doesn't just make us want things. It literally eats up our brain power. This idea was observed in a pretty extreme way during World War II. In what's known as the Minnesota starvation experiment, volunteers were put on a diet that mimicked starvation. And a really weird thing happened. Of course, they were hungry, but their minds also became completely obsessed. They would spend hours reading cookbooks, just looking at pictures of food, fantasizing about meals. The scarcity of food had completely hijacked their attention.
So 2 researchers, Sendil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir, came up with a name for this, the bandwidth tax. They argue that any kind of scarcity, whether it's food or time or money, puts a huge load on our brain. It's kind of like having way too many apps open on your phone at once. The whole system just gets laggy and slow. And think about it, this isn't just for extreme cases. Ever been on a crazy tight deadline? You're so focused on just getting it done that you forget other important things, or maybe make a dumb mistake? That's the bandwidth tax at work.
Okay, so that's a cool theory, but how do you actually prove it? Well, the researchers came up with a really clever experiment. They went to a mall in New Jersey to see if just thinking about money problems could be enough to slow down your brain. And the results were, honestly, they're kind of shocking. They took shoppers and split them into 2 groups, higher and lower income. When they asked the lower-income folks to just imagine having to deal with a surprise $3,000 car repair bill, their scores on an IQ test plummeted. We're talking a drop of about 14 points. To give you some perspective, that's like losing a full night of sleep. Just the stress of thinking about a financial problem had that much of an impact. Meanwhile, the higher-income group scores didn't change at all.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's one study, but they wanted to be sure. So they went all the way to India and studied sugarcane farmers. The setup was brilliant. They tested the farmers before the harvest, when they were really strapped for cash, and then tested them again after the harvest, when they had just been paid for all their crops.
And this is what's so crucial. They were comparing these same people to themselves at different times. The only thing that changed was their financial situation. And guess what? The farmers did way worse on the cognitive tests before the harvest. This was rock-solid proof. It's not that some people are less capable, it's that the context of scarcity was literally draining their mental resources.
So all of this leads to what's called the scarcity trap. It's this nasty, vicious cycle. When your brain's bandwidth is totally consumed by just trying to deal with today's problems, you literally don't have the mental space left to make good long-term plans. The very plans that could help you get out of scarcity.
And this really helps explain why someone under a lot of financial stress might do something that looks, well, irrational to an outsider. As Sindel Mulanathan put it, it's not about being foolish, it's about putting out fires. When your house is on fire, you're not thinking about your retirement plan. You're just trying to find a bucket of water.
A classic example of this is the payday loan. It seems like a lifesaver in the moment, right? It's that bucket of water for the immediate fire. But those super high interest rates just end up starting a much bigger fire later on, trapping people even deeper in that cycle of debt.
So this brings up a really big question. If scarcity literally changes how we think, then when someone in a tough spot makes a bad decision, who's really to blame? There's a fantastic analogy that helps reframe this whole thing. Back in World War II, there was a certain type of plane where pilots kept making a fatal mistake. After landing, they'd accidentally retract the wheels instead of the flaps, causing the plane to crash. Now, were these all just bad pilots? Nope. The problem was that the lever for the wheels and the lever for the flaps looked and felt exactly the same, and they were right next to each other. Under the stress of landing, even the best pilots would grab the wrong one. The solution? They didn't retrain the pilots, they redesigned the cockpit. They put a little rubber wheel on top of the landing gear lever and a little flap shape on the other. And just like that, the crashes stopped. And this is such a powerful way to think about things like poverty. The old view is to blame the pilot, to focus on an individual's bad choices or lack of willpower. But the scarcity view says, hey, maybe we should fix the cockpit. Maybe the problem isn't the person, but the incredibly stressful environment they're forced to operate in, an environment that makes mistakes almost inevitable. So when you wrap your head around this psychology, it's about more than just not falling for a flash sale online. It should really change how we see each other and how we think about the very systems we live in.
It really forces us to ask a tough question. Are the bad decisions we see people make the cause of their difficult circumstances, or are they a consequence? It pushes us away from judgment and towards empathy, and it suggests that maybe instead of just asking people to have more willpower, we should be focused on building better cockpits, more forgiving systems in our policies, in our workplaces, and even in our own lives that recognize that this is just how the human brain works when it's under pressure.